The fire had already consumed half the abandoned prospector's shack when Ethan Matthews heard the screaming. Two voices, high and terrified, coming from inside the burning structure. He'd been riding past when he'd spotted the smoke, and his first instinct had been to investigate. Now, without thinking, he dismounted and ran toward the flames. The door was already engulfed. So Ethan grabbed his canteen, soaked his shirt, wrapped it around his face, and kicked through a weakened section of the wall. Inside, through the thick smoke, he could see them, two Apache girls, maybe 8 and 10 years old, huddled in the corner farthest from the fire. They screamed louder when they saw him, terrified of both the flames and the white stranger suddenly appearing through the smoke. "I'm here to help," Ethan shouted, though he doubted they understood English. He grabbed the younger girl first, tucking her under one arm despite her struggles, then seized the older one's hand and pulled them both toward the hole he'd made. The roof groaned ominously, beams cracking overhead. They made it out with seconds to spare, Ethan throwing himself forward just as a section of roof collapsed behind them. They rolled away from the burning structure, all three of them coughing and gasping. The girls scrambled away from him immediately, clearly terrified despite his rescue. Ethan held up his hands, trying to show he meant no harm, but they backed toward the tree line, ready to bolt. "Wait," he called out. "You're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you." The older girl spoke rapidly in Apache, her voice still rough from smoke. She pointed back at the burning shack, then at the woods, then at Ethan, clearly trying to communicate something urgent. Then, before he could respond, both girls turned and ran into the forest, disappearing like deer. Ethan sat there for a moment, his lungs burning, his hands blistered from the hot wood, wondering what had just happened. He'd risked his life for two children who'd fled from him the moment they could. But he supposed he couldn't blame them. Relations between Apaches and whites were tense at best, deadly at worst. Those girls had no reason to trust him. He rode back to his small ranch, nursing his burns and trying not to think too hard about how close he'd come to dying in that fire. But the image of those two terrified faces stayed with him through the evening and into a restless sleep. The next morning, Ethan was mending fence when he heard horses approaching. His hand went instinctively to his rifle before he saw who it was. The two girls from the fire, now cleaned up and dressed in fresh clothing, riding double on a paint mare. And beside them, on a magnificent black horse, rode a woman who took Ethan's breath away. She was Apache, probably in her early 30s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to respect and authority. Her traditional dress was beautifully made, adorned with intricate beadwork and silver. But it was her face that struck him most, high cheekbones, intelligent dark eyes, and an expression that held both fierce protectiveness and something that looked like gratitude. The three of them rode right up to where Ethan stood, and the woman dismounted with fluid grace. The girls stayed on their horse, watching him with curiosity rather than the fear from yesterday. "You are the one who saved my daughters," the woman said in English. Her accent melodic, but her words perfectly clear. "I did what anyone would have done." "Ma'am," Ethan said, setting down his tools and removing his hat. "No," she said firmly. "You did what a brave man with a good heart would do." Most would have ridden past. Some would have heard children screaming and still ridden past because they were Apache children. "You ran into fire. You risked your life for strangers." She stepped closer, and Ethan could see the tears in her eyes that she was clearly fighting to control. "I am called Kimimela. It means butterfly. These are my daughters, Chenoa." She gestured to the older girl, "and Tyanita," indicating the younger one. "They are everything to me. Yesterday they went to pick berries and found shelter in that old shack when storm clouds came. They fell asleep. A lightning strike started the fire. They would have died if not for you." "I'm just glad I was nearby," Ethan said, genuinely uncomfortable with the intensity of her gratitude. "Are they all right?" "They weren't burned?" "Smoke in their lungs, fear in their hearts, but otherwise unharmed because of you." Kimimela took a deep breath, and Ethan saw her gather herself for something important. "I am a widow. My husband was killed 2 years ago by Mexican soldiers. Since then, I have raised my daughters alone, with help from my brother and his family. But it is hard. Apache women without husbands are vulnerable, especially with children." She met his eyes directly, and Ethan felt his heart start to pound, sensing where this was going but unable to quite believe it. "You saved my daughters' lives," Kimimela continued. "By Apache law, this creates a debt that cannot be repaid with goods or horses. It can only be repaid with life for life. I offer you myself and my daughters. We will come live with you, work for you, serve your household. This is the only way to properly honor what you have done." Ethan stared at her, completely stunned. "Ma'am Kimimela, I can't accept that. I didn't save your daughters expecting any kind of payment." "I know," she said softly. "That is why you deserve it. A man who expects payment for heroism is no hero at all. You expected nothing, which means you deserve everything I can offer." "But you're talking about servitude," Ethan protested. "About turning yourself and your children into my property." "That's not right. That's not what I want." Kimimela's expression shifted, and for the first time he saw vulnerability beneath her strength. "You misunderstand. I do not offer servitude. I offer partnership. I am a skilled healer, a good cook, a hard worker. My daughters are young but learning quickly. We would make your home our home, care for it as our own. In return, you would give us protection, safety, a place where my daughters could grow without fear." She paused, then added more quietly, "And perhaps, if the spirits favor us, it could become more than partnership. I am not offering to be your slave. I am offering to be your wife if you would have me. My daughters need a father. I need a partner. You need a family. I saw it in your eyes yesterday, the loneliness. This ranch is well kept, but empty of life." Ethan felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "You can't make that kind of decision based on one act. You don't even know me." "I know you ran into fire to save children who were nothing to you," Kimimela said. "I know you expected no reward. I know you were trying to refuse the very thing most men in your position would demand as their right. These things tell me more about who you are than 1,000 conversations could." Ethan looked at the two girls watching from their horse, at this proud woman standing before him making an offer that terrified and tempted him in equal measure. "What if I'm not what you need? What if I fail you or your daughters? Then you will be like every other person who tries and sometimes fails," Kimimela said. "But I believe you will try with honor, and that is more than many can say." The proposal hung in the air between them, impossible to accept, but somehow equally impossible to refuse. Ethan had been alone for 5 years, ever since he'd left Missouri after his parents died. He'd built this ranch with his own hands, acre by acre, but it had always felt incomplete, like he was building a home for a family he didn't have. "Give me time," Ethan finally said. "Not to decide if I want your help or your company, but to figure out how to do this right. I won't have you and your daughters here as servants paying a debt. If you stay, it has to be as equals, as partners, as family. That takes planning." Kimimela smiled, and it transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "You are a wise man, Ethan Matthews." "Yes, I know your name. I asked in town this morning who owned this ranch." "We will give you time to plan, but know that I have decided. My daughters and I will make our home here with you." She remounted her horse with practiced ease. "We will return in 1 week. You will have time to think, to prepare. But I tell you now, the spirits have spoken. They saved my daughters through your hands. They led me to you. This is meant to be." The week that followed was the strangest of Ethan's life. He repaired the second bedroom, built bunks for the girls, and tried to process what was happening. He rode into town and faced the stares and whispers when he bought fabric for curtains and clothes sized for women and children. He consulted with a lawyer about how to legally protect Kimimela and her daughters, ensuring they'd have rights and security regardless of what happened between them. And he thought about what Kimimela had said, about loneliness and partnership, about debt and destiny. He'd saved 2 children because it was the right thing to do. Now those children and their mother were offering to transform his empty house into a home. Was he brave enough to accept? When Kimimela returned exactly 1 week later, she brought more than just her daughters. A travois carried her belongings, and her brother rode alongside, a warrior named Chayton who examined Ethan with suspicious eyes. "My brother wants to know your intentions," Kimimela translated. Though Ethan suspected Chayton understood more English than he let on. "He wants to know if you will honor my sister, if you will be good to his nieces." Ethan met Chayton's hard stare directly. "I'll treat them with respect, protect them with my life, and do everything in my power to make them happy. I can't promise I'll always know the right thing to do, but I promise I'll always try to do right by them." Chayton studied him for a long moment, then nodded once and spoke in Apache. Kimimela smiled. "He says you may be white, but you have an honest heart." He gives his blessing. The transition was awkward at first. Chenoa and Tayanita were shy, speaking only to their mother. watching Ethan with wide eyes as if expecting him to transform into a monster. But gradually, over weeks and then months, trust built. Ethan taught them to ride his horses, to care for cattle, to read simple words in English. Kimimela transformed his austere ranch house into a real home, adding touches of beauty and comfort he'd never thought to include. And slowly, carefully, Ethan and Kimimela grew closer. They talked in the evenings after the girls went to bed, sharing stories of their lives, their losses, their dreams. She taught him her language and her people's ways. He shared his books and his hope of building something lasting. 6 months after that first morning when she'd arrived with her proposal, Ethan asked Kimimela to marry him, properly this time. Not as repayment of debt, but as a choice. "I don't want you here because you feel obligated," he said. "I want you here because you want to be here, because we're building something together that matters to both of us." Kimimela took his face in her hands. "Foolish man, I have been here by choice from the beginning. The debt was just an excuse, a way to offer myself without seeming too forward. But the truth is, from the moment I saw you sitting outside that burned shack with your clothes scorched and your hands burned, still worried about my daughters who'd run from you, I knew you were the man I had been waiting for." They married in both Apache and white traditions, with Chayton standing proud beside his sister and the girls serving as flower bearers who giggled through the ceremony. The town talked, of course, but Ethan and Kimimela didn't care. They had something too precious to worry about gossip. A family forged not from obligation, but from gratitude, transformed into love. Years later, when Chenoa and Tayanita were grown women with children of their own, they would tell the story of the white cowboy who'd saved them from fire. But the real story they'd explain wasn't about the rescue. It was about what came after. "He saved our lives," Chenoa would say, "but he gave us more than life. He gave us a home, a father, a future." And Tayanita would add, "Mother said she offered herself to repay a debt, but we were there. We saw her face when she spoke of him. There was no debt in her eyes. There was hope." Ethan and Kimimela built something rare, a true partnership across cultures, a family bound not by blood alone, but by choice, by respect, by love that grew from the smallest seed of heroism into something that sheltered generations. The cowboy had risked his life to save 2 Apache girls, and their mother had brought him something in return that shocked everyone. Not servitude or obligation, but the offer of genuine family, freely given, between equals who saw in each other not just need but possibility. And in accepting that offer, in building a life with Kimimela and her daughters, Ethan learned that sometimes the greatest rewards for heroism aren't the ones you expect, but the ones you never knew you needed until they're offered with open hands and an honest heart.